Released on November 10th in the year 2020, we had more than enough time with the Xbox Series S to have a fair perspective of its capabilities. We played its games, tested the hardware, and now we feel ready to let you know what we found out, both good and bad. Is the most affordable Xbox still a good option today? How does it compare to its bigger brother, the Xbox Series X? And most importantly, is it good enough compared to a PS5 or even a gaming PC? Get ready, because today we are taking a look at the Xbox Series S 2 years later.
Super Players.
The first thing that comes to mind when you see an Xbox Series S in person is just how tiny it is. Compared to the Xbox Series X and the PS5, this console is so much smaller. And not only that, it is really lightweight too. So if you travel a lot, this console may be a good companion on your trips. The black and white console design was a bit controversial at first, and not everyone was a fan. But we must admit that it has grown on us in recent years, and now we consider it to be iconic. And the best part is that if you don't like the design, you can just place it horizontally where it will look a lot more subdued and basically like a smaller Xbox One S. It's also worth mentioning that despite its size, this device is really quiet. You can place it on top of your desk and you'll barely hear the fan most of the time, as long as it has good ventilation, of course. In the few years we've been using it, we have only noticed the fan after a few sessions of 120 FPS gaming, and even then it was totally acceptable. Also, let's state the obvious. The Xbox Series S is simply the most affordable way to enter the next generation of gaming. And yes, you can argue that since this console was not designed with the goal of playing games at 4K resolution, it may not be as next-gen as something like an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. But we disagree. This little beast can play a bunch of games at 120 FPS, has blazing fast loading times, and can play all the games its big brother can play. Also, it's important to know that 4K gaming is not as common as some people may think it is. Even today, powerful gaming PCs that cost a lot more money can't play a bunch of games at 4K and 60 frames per second. Consoles like the PlayStation 5 need to use dynamic resolutions most of the time to achieve a 4K resolution, and in some cases, it can only sustain 4K briefly. Even better, not everyone has a 4K TV, and most gaming monitors tend to be 1440p or 1080p with a high refresh rate anyway. So yeah, the Series S may not be made for playing games at 4K, but also at this price point, it doesn't need to. And of course, if you've been thinking about getting an Xbox Series S, you've probably asked yourself if you should spend the extra money and get an Xbox Series X. Well, in our experience, after playing so many games, besides the better graphic fidelity and resolution, the experience itself is basically the same, including world-class backwards compatibility that goes as far as the first Xbox console. One of the most amazing exclusive features on Xbox in this gen is called Quick Resume, a feature that lets you suspend your game in a specific point and then be able to resume it without having to load the entire game from the beginning. Think about it like saving states on emulators, but now for consoles. The most interesting thing is that you can do that with multiple games at the same time, and even turn off your console while keeping the ability to quick resume. Some may think that this type of advanced functionality would only work on the Series X, but no, they work perfectly fine on the Series S too. Not all games support this, but when they do, it is amazing, and not even the PS5 has something like this. And of course, the Xbox Series X is much more powerful, but also almost double the price. And yes, when you go side by side, the difference in graphics quality is pretty obvious. But in normal day-to-day gaming sessions, we found out that a bunch of people won't even notice. Despite that, all the game's accessories and features are compatible between both devices. The best thing is that if you buy an Xbox Series S and then upgrade to an Xbox Series X, you just have to log into your account and all achievements, progress, and subscriptions will be there at no extra cost. and games will be upgraded for the Series X version at no extra cost thanks to a feature called Smart Delivery. Of course, not everything is perfect, and this console is no exception. During the few years we've spent with the console, we have found that the white color on the console and the controller can be problematic. Although not made of a glossy material, it still can get stains constantly, and they don't always come off easily. The same happens with the included white controller and the grip texture on the back. It can get dirty really fast. We also noticed that the rubber feet tend to fall off eventually, making the console sit unbalanced. But the worst thing has to be the storage. Being 512 gigabytes, or about half the storage of a Series X, you may think that it should be enough to get around, right? Well, maybe not so much. This number does not take into account that the operating system takes away a bunch of that precious storage space, leaving you with just about 364 GBs of storage. And no, you can't use an external hard drive for installing new games, only old games. So the only way to get around this limit is to buy a proprietary storage expansion that costs almost the same as the console itself. And at that point, you may be better off just buying an Xbox Series X. Considering that this is a digital-only console, we must admit that sometimes it can be a bit challenging to manage storage. Depending on the game, you might be able to install about 3 AAA titles and a few indie games. For some people, that may be enough, but definitely not for everyone. And yes, you can do some juggling around, like installing a backup of new Xbox Series games on an external hard drive, and then moving it to the fast internal storage when you want to play them, but still, it's just more work, and that may not be for everyone. It's a little tough, but it definitely can be pulled off. Honestly, it just depends on your gaming habits. But despite the few negatives, nothing is a deal breaker really, and we must confess we love our Xbox Series S. We've been having a blast playing some of the best Xbox exclusives ever, like the amazing Flight Simulator 2020 with its real-world-based maps, and also Forza Horizon 5 has been incredibly fun and beautiful, probably the best the series has ever been. And despite all the microtransaction controversies, we must admit that Halo Infinite has been awesome as well. The semi-open world single-player campaign has been fantastic, and the multiplayer gameplay feels so good. Even better at 120 frames per second on this tiny but powerful console. And of course, all the multi-platform big hitters like Elden Ring just work great here as well. It's also interesting to note that both Series S and Series X have great mouse and keyboard compatibility, so you can play a few games like Gears Tactic as if you were on a PC. Even games like Fortnite make the experience indistinguishable from playing on a computer at just a tiny fraction of the price. It's even more exciting considering how expensive GPUs have gotten in recent years. And of course, we can't let this video go by without talking about Game Pass. Xbox Series S and Game Pass combined are just such a great combo. It doesn't matter if you're buying the console for the young ones, making a return for gaming as an adult, or just wanting to play a bunch of different games without buying them. There is no denying that Game Pass is a great deal. This subscription gives you instant access to hundreds of games, including new Xbox exclusives from day one at no extra cost. And despite Sony's best efforts for competing with their PlayStation Plus subscription, Xbox is still leading the way by far. So yeah, these few years with the Xbox Series S have been amazing. It's not an expensive console at all, and you can actually find it in stores at retail prices, while the games just keep on coming with Game Pass. It's not perfect by any means, but it also doesn't have to be. What Microsoft set out to accomplish with this console has been fulfilled. Simply put, Xbox Series S is a great option for those wanting to game in the Xbox ecosystem while playing on a new generation of consoles.
Super players.